Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Always. What are we exploring today?
Well, today we're going to a really fascinating but kind of lesser known corner of history. We're talking Berlin Koreans in the early 20th century.
Oh, wow. Berlin Koreans. That's intriguing.
Yeah, specifically we're going to be looking at the period between like 1900 and 1940, a time of massive global change, to say the least.
Absolutely. Setting the stage for so much of what we see today.
Exactly. And our main source for this deep dive is Frank Hoffman's paper, Berlin Koreans and Pictured Koreans.
Okay, I've heard of Hoffman.
Yeah, his work is always insightful. And in this one, he uncovers some truly surprising stories.
I bet. It's amazing how these individual lives can intersect with these massive historical events, like the rise of Nazism.
Right. And the Japanese occupation of Korea, World War II,
hmm
it's all happening during this time.
It really makes you think about the complexities of identity and cultural exchange during such a turbulent time. Exactly. I mean, imagine Korea under Japanese occupation, Germany under Nazi rule, and right in the middle of it all, you have these Korean individuals making lives for themselves in Berlin.
A real melting pot of ideologies and
Yeah.
experiences.
So where do we even begin?
Well, Hoffman starts with a real trailblazer, Pei Lunchong, the first Korean artist to train in Europe.
Oh, I've read a little about him. He was in Berlin for quite a while, right?
Yeah, arrived in 1921 and stayed for almost 2 decades. Built quite a reputation with his woodblock prints and paintings.
His work was pretty popular, wasn't it?
It resonated both in Korea and in Germany. He focused on depicting Korean folk life.
Which probably offered a pretty unique perspective for German audiences.
Absolutely. But here's where it gets really interesting. Hoffman points out that Pei's work was exhibited at the 1936 Berlin Olympics.
Oh, wow, the Nazi Olympics.
Yep, and get this, sponsored by the German-Japanese Society.
Wait, so a Korean artist is showcasing his art at the Nazi Olympics, funded by an organization promoting German-Japanese ties.
That's complicated, to say the least.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
It really shows how art was used as a tool for cultural propaganda, especially in that era.
Right, I mean, Japan and Germany were allies at this point, and Korea was under Japanese control. So in a way, I guess Pei's art, even though it's distinctly Korean, could be seen as representing Japanese influence.
Exactly. It makes you wonder about how much agency he really had and how others were perceiving his identity.
And how they might have been using it for their own purposes.
Exactly.
So it's not just about the art itself, but also the context in which it's presented.
Right.
And Hoffman mentions that Pei had a daughter born in Berlin to a German mother. After the war, with the division of Korea, the family ended up on opposite sides of a divided nation.
A powerful reminder of the personal impact of these global forces.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to another figure from Hoffman's research, an ektae.
Oh, now, his story might surprise some listeners. He's the composer of the South Korean national anthem, the Eguka.
Okay, so the guy who wrote the South Korean national anthem, what's so surprising about that?
Well, his life is full of contradictions, especially when you consider the historical context. Even the anthem itself has a fascinating origin. It was initially sung in Korean churches in the U.S., set to the tune of Auld Lang Syne.
Interesting. So it's a familiar tune with new lyrics.
Yeah, but in 1936, while living in Berlin, An composed a new melody for it. And that's where things take a controversial turn.
Because.
In 2006, researchers uncovered a newsreel from 1942. It shows An conducting a concert in Berlin celebrating the Japanese puppet state of Manchukuo.
So on one hand, he's composing the music that becomes a symbol of Korean national identity, but on the other, he's conducting pro-Japanese concerts in Nazi Germany.
It's a puzzle, isn't it? And Hoffman digs into An's close relationship with Harakuchi, a Japanese diplomat and intelligence officer.
Oh, so there's a political angle here, too.
Definitely. Ahara arranged concerts for An and actively promoted his career through the German-Japanese Society.
It sounds like An was caught in a really difficult situation, trying to balance his Korean heritage with the realities of the political landscape.
Right. And it raises questions about his own beliefs and motivations. Did he genuinely believe in the propaganda he was helping to spread? Or was it just about survival and career advancement?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe a bit of both.
Hoffman doesn't shy away from these questions. He even points out that Anne worked in Paris during the war with the Orchestre de Radio Paris, essentially becoming part of the German propaganda machine.
So we've got a Korean artist whose work is displayed at the Nazi Olympics, and a Korean composer seemingly collaborating with the Japanese in Nazi Germany. Man, Hoffman's research is full of surprises.
He does like to keep us on our toes.
He does, and it gets even more complex. Next, he introduces us to Kuni Masami.
Now, he was a Korean-born dancer who achieved fame in Berlin as a representative of modern Japanese dance.
Hold on, didn't we start this deep dive to learn about Berlin Koreans?
We did, but like I said, it's complicated. His identity is layered. He was born in Korea as Pak Young-in, then adopted the Japanese name Ihara Masami, and finally took on the stage name Kuni Masami.
So each name represents a shift in allegiance, a kind of deliberate reshaping of his identity.
Exactly, and all within a very specific historical and cultural context.
So what led him to make such a drastic change?
Well, ambition probably played a role. He wanted to succeed as a dancer, and during the Japanese occupation, aligning himself with Japan offered way more opportunities.
So it was a matter of survival, in a sense.
Perhaps. He even received a scholarship from the Japanese Ministry of Education to study and perform in Berlin during the 1930s.
So he finds success in Berlin, connecting with leading figures of German modern dance like Mary Wigman and Max Turpis. But wasn't German modern dance considered avant-garde, rebellious?
It was, which is why it's so fascinating that many prominent figures, including Wigman, ended up collaborating with the Nazi regime.
Wait, the Nazis embraced modern dance? I always thought they were all about traditional art forms.
It's counterintuitive, but they recognized its power and appeal, its potential for propaganda.
Okay, so they weren't opposed to this supposedly rebellious art form. I'm realizing I have a lot to learn about this period.
We all do. And Hoffmann points out that German modern dance, despite its perceived rebelliousness, wasn't inherently opposed to fascism. There were surprising ideological overlaps.
Really? Like what?
Well, for one, there are shared roots in the Lebensreform movement, which emphasized a back-to-nature lifestyle, a rejection of modern society.
So more complex than meets the eye. But what about Kuni? He was more than just a dancer, right?
Oh, much more. Hoffmann reveals that he performed for the Nazi leisure organization Kraft durch Freude, or Strength Through Joy as it translates to.
Okay, so he was entertaining the troops.
Not just that, he traveled to occupied territories, even danced for guards at the Lodz ghetto in Poland. It raises some really uncomfortable questions about the role of art in such horrific circumstances.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine dancing for the very people responsible for such atrocities.
It's definitely thought-provoking. And as if that wasn't enough, Hoffmann reveals Kuni was also a Japanese intelligence agent.
Whoa, hold on. A dancer and a spy?
He was feeding information back to Japan while maintaining his public persona as a dancer and cultural critic.
Talk about a double life. It's amazing how these seemingly separate worlds, art, politics, espionage, were so intertwined during this period.
It makes you wonder about the motivations and the pressures that led people to make such choices.
Kuni's story really challenges our assumptions about this era. So we've covered three pretty remarkable individuals so far: the artist, the composer, the dancer, each navigating this political turmoil in their own way.
And Hoffmann doesn't stop there. He introduces us to a couple more figures, Chang-kuk and Kim Pikpang. They illustrate how Koreans navigated the complexities of the Third Reich.
So even more layers to this story.
Chang was an aeronautical engineer. His brother later became a prominent figure in South Korean politics. Kim was a eugenicist.
So again, we see this range of experiences. Some Koreans might have ended up in Germany due to family connections or professional opportunities, while others, like Kim, actively sought out involvement with the Nazi regime, perhaps for personal gain or out of ideological conviction.
Exactly. And Hoffmann saves one final twist for the end. He introduces us to Han Hung-soo, the father of North Korean archaeology, who was studying in Berlin in 1941.
Okay, and what's the twist?
He was also an intelligence agent, working for the Germans.
Spying for the Germans. Who was he spying on?
Japan, their supposed ally.
Wait, a Korean spying on the Japanese for the Germans, even though they were allies? This is getting more and more complicated.
It might sound crazy, but it makes sense when you consider the shifting alliances of the time. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor.
Created a lot of suspicion and distrust, I bet.
Absolutely. Everyone was spying on everyone.
So we've got this whole web of Korean individuals in Berlin, each navigating the political turmoil in their own way. Some collaborating, some resisting, some caught in the crossfire.
It's like a historical puzzle, where nothing is quite as it seems, and we've only just scratched the surface of their stories.
Wow, so much to unpack. It's amazing how Hoffmann just pulls you right into this world.
He's a master storyteller, that's for sure.
And he doesn't shy away from the complex stuff, like we were talking about, and Ikete, the composer.
Yeah, the guy who wrote the South Korean national anthem, but was also working with the Nazis.
It's like, how do you even reconcile those two parts of his life?
Right, and Hoffmann goes even deeper into Anne's relationship with the German-Japanese society, debunks this idea that he was a student of Richard Strauss.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing that somewhere. He studied under Strauss, the famous German composer.
It's a claim Anne made after the war, but Hoffmann's research shows that their connection was much more transactional.
So he wasn't really a student, more like they used each other for their own purposes.
Pretty much. Hoffmann points out that almost every concert Anne conducted in the early 1940s was arranged by the German-Japanese Society.
They were using his music as a way to promote their own agenda.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially his piece, Korea Fantasia. It was all about showcasing this like harmony between Germany and Japan, with Korea kind of lumped in there as part of the Japanese sphere.
I see. Creating this image of a unified cultural front. But did Anne actually buy into all of this, or was he just playing along to advance his career?
It's hard to know for sure. We can't get inside his head. But Hoffmann's research paints a picture of a complex guy. Maybe he was willing to overlook some things to get ahead.
I mean, he definitely benefited from their support, right?
Oh, yeah. Access to orchestras, concert halls, things that would have been difficult for a Korean composer at that time, especially under Nazi rule.
And we can't forget the historical context. This was a time when Jewish musicians and anyone opposed to the Nazis were being persecuted, exiled.
Anne was essentially stepping into the void they left behind.
It's a tough thing to think about. So he's benefiting from this system while others are suffering because of it. It's just morally complicated.
Hoffmann doesn't let us forget that. He follows Anne's trajectory, and it really mirrors the rise of fascism, from the U.S. to Germany, then to Spain, after Paris was liberated.
Another fascist dictatorship.
Yeah.
So it does make you question his political leanings, or at least his willingness to turn a blind eye.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white. People make compromises, they make tough choices, and sometimes they end up on the wrong side, even if they didn't start out with bad intentions.
Yeah, a lot of gray areas. But okay, let's talk about the music itself for a minute. Does the Aguka, the anthem, reveal anything about this complicated history?
Well, Hoffmann notes that the melody Anne composed is very much in the Western classical tradition. G major, a key often associated with triumph, that soaring anthemic quality.
It's funny to think that a song now seen as like quintessentially Korean actually has these European roots.
Right. And the irony is, while he's composing this music that would become a symbol of Korean independence, he's also working on pieces like his Manchukuo Symphony, celebrating the Japanese puppet state.
It's really hard to wrap your head around that.
Hoffmann talks about how Anne actually started working on the Aguka melody while he was still in Philadelphia.
Oh, really? So before he even went to Germany?
Yeah. He was setting it to patriotic Korean lyrics that were already being sung, but to the tune of Old Lang Syne. But it was in Berlin, in the heart of the Nazi regime, that he finalized it, incorporated it into his Korea Fantasia.
Wow. It's like those two worlds, Korean nationalism and Nazi Germany, were somehow colliding in his music.
Exactly. A perfect example of how history rarely follows a straight line, full of unexpected twists and turns. And Anne's story is just one piece of this puzzle. Hoffmann introduces us to others, each with their own unique perspective.
Right, like Kuni Masami. We talked about him earlier, the Korean-born dancer who rose to fame representing Japanese dance. Unlike An, who kind of downplayed his Korean heritage, Kuni seemed to go all in on being Japanese.
Yeah, even his stage name, Kuni, means nation or state in Japanese. It's like he was making a statement.
And all of this while Korea was still under Japanese occupation. That must have been a controversial choice.
You bet. Hoffmann points out that while Kuni was celebrated in Japan and Germany, he was largely ignored in Korea. Some even saw him as a traitor.
You mentioned earlier that there might be more to his decision than just opportunism.
Right. Hoffmann speculates that maybe he was trying to escape the limitations of his Korean heritage, seeking a new identity in a more cosmopolitan setting.
Berlin in the 1930s, despite the Nazis, was still seen as a center for art and culture.
Exactly. And aligning himself with Japan may have seemed like the way to break into that world.
It's amazing how individual desires can intersect with these huge political realities.
And Kuni was very good at playing the game. Hoffmann talks about how he cultivated relationships with key figures in German modern dance, like Mary Wigman. He even got a scholarship from the Japanese Ministry of Education to study in Berlin.
And then there's his work with the Freud. Not just performing for the elite, but entertaining the troops, traveling to occupied territories, even dancing for guards at the Lodz ghetto.
It's disturbing, to say the least. Makes you wonder about the role of art in such a dark time.
Did he not understand the implications of what he was doing?
It's a tough question. Hoffman doesn't offer easy answers. He presents Cooney as a product of his time, someone who benefited from the system but was also a victim of it.
And all of this was happening within the context of this increasingly complicated relationship between Germany and Japan. They were allies, but also rivals, each trying to gain more power.
And don't forget, Cooney was also working as a Japanese intelligence agent, spying on the Germans while also promoting cultural exchange between the two countries.
So much deception. It's like everyone had a hidden agenda. It really underscores the deep mistrust that existed beneath the surface of that alliance.
Makes you wonder who you can trust at all.
Cooney's story really is a microcosm of the whole era. Identity, ambition, collaboration, resistance all tangled together.
And Hoffman, to his credit, doesn't shy away from these messy parts of history. He presents these individuals with all their contradictions and asks us to confront the complexities of their lives. But their stories are also about more than just individuals. They reveal a lot about the Korean experience in Germany during this time.
That's a good point. We focused a lot on these three figures, Pei, An, and Cooney, but Hoffman's research introduces us to others too who offer different perspectives.
Right. Like Chang Kook, the aeronautical engineer whose family later became prominent in South Korean politics. He reminds us that not all Koreans in Germany were struggling artists or spies. Some were able to build successful careers, even within the Nazi regime.
It's easy to get caught up in these big, dramatic narratives, but it's important to remember the everyday lives of people just trying to get by.
And then there's Kim Paek-pang, the eugenicist who actively collaborated with the Nazis. His story is a darker reminder that some Koreans embraced Nazi ideology, whether for personal gain or out of genuine conviction. It's a disturbing part of this history that we can't ignore.
It definitely challenges any simple assumptions we might have. Hoffman shows that these Koreans weren't just passive victims. They were making choices, some good, some bad, some morally ambiguous, that shaped their own lives and even influenced events around them.
He avoids easy judgments and presents a much more nuanced view of history, recognizing both the agency and the constraints that shaped their lives. And just when you think you've got a handle on it all, he throws in the story of Han Hoon-soo.
The father of North Korean archaeology.
That's the one. Remember how we talked about the mistrust between the Axis powers?
Yeah, the spying and all that.
Well, it turns out Han was working for the Germans, spying on Japan.
Wait, really? A Korean spying on the Japanese for the Nazis? This is mind-blowing.
It just shows how deep the suspicion ran, especially after the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in Pearl Harbor. Everyone was looking over their shoulder.
Makes you wonder who you could trust at all.
Exactly. And it makes Han's story even more intriguing. Was he a Korean patriot playing one side against the other? Or a skilled opportunist? It's hard to say.
And it goes back to those central themes that Hoffman's exploring. The ambiguity, identity, the blurred lines between collaboration and resistance, and the impossible choices people faced.
Each of these figures, in their own way, embodies those themes. And by looking closely at their lives, we get a better understanding not just of them, but of the historical forces that shaped their world, forces that still resonate today.
It's amazing, isn't it? All these lives, all these stories intersecting in Berlin during such a tumultuous period. It really makes you think.
It does. Hoffman takes us on quite a journey, doesn't he? From art exhibits at the Nazi Olympics to concert halls echoing with propaganda, and even into the shadowy world of espionage.
Yeah, and through it all, these Berlin Koreans, each navigating these incredibly complex moral and political landscapes.
And Hoffman's real strength is that he never lets us forget that complexity. He presents these figures with all their contradictions and ambiguities, refusing to simplify their stories into neat categories of good and bad, collaborators or resistor.
Right. It's like he's saying, hey, these were real people living in extraordinary times, making difficult choices.
Exactly. And by understanding their choices, we gain a deeper understanding of the historical forces that shaped their world, forces that continue to resonate with us today.
So we've explored their lives in detail, but I keep coming back to this question. What does it all mean? What's the takeaway here? Why should we care about these seemingly distant lives?
Well, for me, Hoffman's work is a powerful reminder that history isn't just a collection of dates and facts. It's about people, real people grappling with real challenges, making choices that shape their own destinies and even influence the course of history itself.
I like that. It's about finding those human stories within the larger historical narrative.
And Hoffman argues that these specific stories, stories of these Berlin Koreans, offer a unique lens through which to view these huge themes: identity, cultural exchange, the role of art in times of political turmoil.
It's like each individual story illuminates a different facet of those bigger ideas.
Exactly. Like, take Pei Unsung, the artist who exhibited at the 1936 Olympics. His story makes us think about the relationship between art and propaganda. Can art ever be truly apolitical, especially during wartime?
And then there's an Ikete, the composer whose music was used to promote both Korean nationalism and Japanese imperialism. His story is about the fluidity of identity, especially for those living under colonial rule. How do you hold on to your heritage while also navigating the pressures of a dominant power?
Tough questions. And then you have Kuni Masami, the dancer turned spy. His story is maybe the most ethically challenging of them all. His embrace of a Japanese identity, his performances for the Nazi regime, they raise questions about the compromises artists make in times of crisis. How far is too far when it comes to survival or success?
Those are questions we still grapple with today, aren't they? The role of art and artists in society, the balance between personal ambition and moral responsibility. These historical examples give us a framework for thinking about these issues.
Right. And they show that there are no easy answers. It's not always a clear-cut choice between collaboration and resistance. Sometimes it's about navigating a minefield, trying to make the best of a bad situation, hoping to survive.
One thing that really struck me is how all of these seemingly separate lives were connected by these larger forces. The war, the colonialism, the competing ideologies, they were all swept up in this historical maelstrom.
But even within those constraints, they still had agency. They made choices, took actions that shaped their own lives, and sometimes even left a mark on the world around them. It's a testament to human resilience and the enduring power of individual choice, even in the face of overwhelming circumstances.
I think that's a really important point. We often think of history as something that happens to people, but Hoffman reminds us that individuals can also shape history.
And Hoffman challenges us to rethink the way we understand the history of Korea during this period. He wants us to move beyond the grand narratives, the simple binaries, and see history as this tapestry woven from countless individual experiences, each one unique and multifaceted.
It's a call to look closer, to recognize the nuances and ambiguities that often get lost in those simplified versions of history.
Exactly. And to remember that even these seemingly obscure corners of history can offer us profound insights into what it means to be human.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Berlin Koreans in the early 20th century. We've explored their lives, their challenges, and their triumphs, uncovering layers of complexity and nuance along the way.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners have found it as thought-provoking as we have.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to check out Frank Hoffman's paper, Berlin Koreans and Pictured Koreans. It's a real eye-opener.
And as always, we invite you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into those hidden corners of history. You never know what you might find.
Until next time, stay curious, everyone.